Welcome to the Social Learning Amplified podcast, the podcast that brings us candid conversations with educators who are finding new ways to engage and motivate their students inside and outside the classroom. Each episode of Social Learning Amplified will give you real-life examples and practical strategies you can put into practice in your own courses. Let's meet today's guest. Thank you for joining us today for this episode on empowering active learning in the Social Learning Amplified podcast series. I'm your host, Eric Mazur, and our guests today are Tristan and Jeff Wang. Thank you for being here today. I am so excited to be talking to you about your article, Empowering Active Learning, a social annotation tool for improving student engagement, that appeared in the British Journal of Educational Technology in October last year. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here.
Let me start by telling you a bit about our guests. Tristan is an award-winning educational designer at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. His principal areas of research are educational technology and teacher-student communication. He had previously taught at the International Baccalaureate Diploma and vocational educational levels. Jeff Wang is an associate professor of marketing at Monash University. He's an award-winning teacher. His teaching philosophy is to co-create value with students. He has taught at the undergraduate, master's, and doctoral level in the United States, Hong Kong, and now Australia. First of all, congratulations on your article. I saw a tweet about it, and the social annotation tool immediately piqued my interest. And as you might imagine, I was thrilled that it was an article about Perusall. And as I dove into your article, there were two aspects that really excited me. The first was that it was an application of Perusall in English language instruction, very different from my own use. And secondly, you're finding that students with low English proficiency achieve comparable results in Perusall as those with high English proficiency. I mean, that is simply amazing. So before we dive sort of in the results of your article, what was the background and motivation for applying Perusall in the course?
So how we heard about Perusall, actually, it came from you, Eric. You visited Melbourne back in 2017 and gave a speech about peer learning and social annotation and Perusall. So at that time, it was the first time we heard about social annotation and Perusall. At that time, we were actually looking to fill in gap in student engagement in those online or flipped classrooms, especially in terms of the preparation for the tutorials. And then we saw the potential of social annotation tools to fill this gap. We were also exploring tools that could make learning more interactive and more collaborative. We have students from very diverse backgrounds, like English as additional language students, or sometimes the students who have never been exposed to the idea of flipped classroom. So in order to facilitate different needs of those students, we were exploring different tools, and that's how we heard about social annotation and Perusall. And since 2018, we started to pilot that, and very soon we implemented it in multiple units.
Well, that's just amazing. You know, I've given talks in many places, as you might imagine, and you really never know what the consequences are of you giving a talk somewhere. So to hear this 7 years after my visit is just absolutely wonderful and rewarding. And Jeff, how did you find out about Perusall and decided to implement it in your course?
So I have to thank Tristan for making suggestion on this. I think it was in the beginning of 2020, Tristan and I we talk about how to enhance my particular course here in Monash, because I've been using flipped mode in this course. However, when I encounter some issues in terms of student engagement before they come to the classroom for the tutorial. Right. So basically, the structure of the unit is that the students will learn the lessons by themselves, and then they're ready, and then they come to the classroom, get ready for the discussions and all these activities. And I just sense that some of the students, or maybe even many of the students, are not totally ready, or not really, they do not really understand the content of the lessons. So I talked to Tristan about what are some of the methods or the tools that can enhance students' learning before they come to the classroom. And Tristan, he was very helpful, and he told me about Perusall. So we just started experimenting with Perusall. I think that's the beginning of 2020, which happened to be the start of the pandemic, which I think is it's a blessing in disguise, because it's really Perusall helps students learn before they come to the classroom. And remember, at that time, all the classroom became online. So even students, they log into the online classrooms for the tutorial, they didn't really see each other. They were not really in the classroom. However, Perusall provided a platform or a space that allowed them to interact with each other even before the tutorial, which was really helpful.
That's wonderful. Now, when I visited in 2017, Perusal only handled textual material, PDFs and so on, static material. And it was not really until 2020 that all of a sudden I said, we really need to have video there as well. Which leads me to the question, how did you, each of you in your courses, implement Perusal? What material do you make available? Where does it fit in the overall scheme of learning and learning assessment?
For my particular unit, I used lecture slides. So, I do provide videos to my students on the learning management system, and we use Moodle here at Monash. I didn't really use videos on the platform of Perusall. I started just putting on my lecture slides on Perusall. So these are basically, I think they're in PDF, and students will see all the slides that they watch, basically from the Moodle site. But I know, Tristan, you help with many other units. Perhaps they use different formats of the materials.
That's true. For Monash Business School, we have different units using Perusall. Some of the units are similar to Jeff's units, that students watch online lecture videos and then do annotations on lecture slides. Some units use the traditional reading type. They find journal articles which have no copyright complications, which they can use from the publishers, and then upload those files to Perusall to annotate, or scanned textbook. And we also have units using podcast and videos.
You really use the whole gamut of materials that can go into Perusal. That's wonderful.
Yeah, we were excited to find out, it was 2 years ago, when Perusal had all those new functions that students can watch the video together and make annotations. It's really, really, I think it's innovating, and teachers were excited about that new function. And ever since then, we have units now using it, not only videos, but also podcasts.
So in reading your article, I don't usually read the British Journal of Educational Technology, but I was particularly struck by this box, right? At the top of the article. I find that great. I wish all papers or all journals did that, essentially sort of highlighting the key points of the article and taking, saying where we already are and what this paper add and what the key findings are. So I thought that was wonderful, because that immediately sucked me into the article. But I think it would be great for our listeners to hear what you consider to be the main findings in your research.
The main findings in our research includes that pre-class social annotation activities such as Perusall positive impact on student performance on post-class assessment, because in this course we have weekly pre-class social annotations and weekly post-class essay type assessment. So we can see a strong positive impact post-class performance. Unlike other individual assessments in this course, where the English as additional language students with different English proficiency levels might perform differently, but in Perusall they have performed equally well. It means
And
that
how do you measure that performance?
so when the students are enrolled in this course, if they are English as additional language students, they are required to take English proficiency tests. So if they meet a certain standard, then they're admitted without any condition. If they are not at that level, but they are very close, they are able to enroll in language bridging programs in the university before they start to study Jeff's units, for example. Therefore, with this criteria, we were able to allocate our students into different groups based on their English proficiency before they joined Monash. And then we compared their performance in different assessments, including the Perusall ones. And we found out they performed equally well on Perusall, unlike other individual assessments.
That's very impressive. Jeff, anything to add from your perspective?
Maybe I can just elaborate a little bit on the structure of the weekly assessments, and also basically what happens to students on a weekly basis.
And how many students are there in total in the course?
So for this is I think 2021 when we did the study, when we collected data. In this study, there were more than 300 students in total in both semesters. And I think one very unique characteristic of these students is that 95% of them are international students. Right? So it is very different from perhaps many of the students that you teach at Harvard. A lot of them are domestic students, or at least native speakers of English. So the vast majority of the students are not native speakers of English. And actually, many of them, it's their first time to leave their home of origin, come to a different country to study. And remember, this is one of the core units. So for many students, this is one of the first units that they take here in Australia. So on a weekly basis, how this unit is structured is that, usually I'll make the lessons, the lecture available online, let's say on Saturday. And also at the same time, the Perusall, the social annotation, is also available. So use the lecture slides for students to make comments and ask questions. Let's say the tutorials are on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So the Perusall, the deadline for Perusall will be right before the start of the tutorial. So Monday afternoon, it will be the deadline for the Perusall activity. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll have tutorials for all the students. We have to divide the students into smaller groups. Imagine this is 200 students in total. And usually in each tutorial, we have 25 students. Right? So we divide them into smaller groups for tutorials, and then we have those activities. And then usually 2 days or 3 days after the tutorial, we'll have another, we call it post-tutorial or post-class assessment. That's the essay question. So the essay question will also be based on the content of that week's lesson and also the activities that students do in the tutorial. So in this research that we publish, we basically test if the Perusall activity or Perusall performance will have an impact on the essay question, on the subsequent essay question of the same week, basically. So this is on a weekly basis. We want to see if students' pre-tutorial performance will have an impact on their post-tutorial performance, and we do find a significant relationship between these two.
So, turning to something that I know, many instructors care deeply about is what do the students think about Perusall? I mean, do they see this as, just additional busy work that they have to do, or, you sort of controlling their activity, or do they engage in it with energy and enthusiasm?
The student feedback is generally positive, very positive. They appreciate the collaborative learning environment. Many actually reported made the pre-class learning more engaging, and remember this was during the pandemic time, and they feel less isolated as a result. They recognize the cognitive benefit because they were able to learn from others' annotations. Even writing their own annotations, discussing with each other will help them better understand the content of the course. And socially, they enjoyed discussing with others. And very interestingly, in our finding that many students expressed the willingness to express themselves. So they feel like their voice has been heard in such online environment. And they also had very positive feedback on user-friendly technology, such as the interactivity and how easy Perusall is for them to use. That's a very good feedback.
Definitely, yes. And I can certainly imagine that positive reaction to being socially connected during the pandemic. Have you continued collecting feedback from students? How is it now that people are again back on campus, able to socialize and interact more? Do they still appreciate the social interaction in the Perusall platform?
They still do, right? So we have the teaching evaluation at the end of the semester. And every semester we receive very positive feedback from students about Perusall. I think the reason is that even though now students they do see each other, they come to the classroom, but when they actually learn the lesson, when they prepare before they come to the tutorial, most of them they still do that individually, right? So they will do that, in front of the computer. They learn the lesson. They do whatever pre-tutorial activities. However, Perusall is probably the best social platform, because when they actually learn the lesson, and in my particular case, that they can read the lecture notes or the lecture slides, and then if they have any questions about any of the point on the slides, they can ask a question, and hopefully their fellow classmates will respond. And if they don't still understand or they disagree, they will respond back. So we see a lot of back and forth interactions between students. And this, I think, this is what students really appreciate, because they feel that learning the lesson is no longer an individual effort. It becomes a group effort. So usually we put 20 students in one group. So this is almost like a small community or study group that students that can learn with each other instead of just learning by themselves.
I see. And just out of curiosity, is your course focusing on written language competency or spoken language proficiency?
So it's mostly written.
I see. The reason I'm asking is because I'm wondering, are there certain features we could add to Perusall to facilitate, sort of oral, verbal, spoken language? I mean, certainly, since we can upload video, we could certainly upload audio, and we could not just annotate video, we could annotate audio, and maybe we can even do audio annotations of audio. I don't know if any of these features would be actually useful for your type of instruction.
I think as Tristan mentioned, because I think the characteristics of the students of this particular unit, they are international students, and many of their English is not very good. So actually, I believe they actually feel more comfortable if they just write things up instead of speaking up. And we actually have that challenge in the classroom, because some of the students they may not feel very comfortable speaking up in English in front of others. However, when they are on Perusall, they feel more comfortable, because they can take their time to think about what are the right words to use, and they may even nowadays they may even use ChatGPT to copy edit whatever they want to write, right? So I think give them a more comfortable space to express their ideas and opinions.
I see. Turning from students to faculty, what has the reaction been of your colleagues? And also, how widely has adoption of Perusall spread in Monash University?
Perusall is definitely quite popular in Monash. I will say we have many teachers using that in different faculties. I cannot speak for other faculties, but I do know that they are using it. And I know that in Monash Business School, we started a community of practice by our teachers about Perusall from 2020. So it has been almost 4 years. We organize regular meetings with academics who are using Perusall in their units. So we share our experience and help each other because it's not officially supported by our IT department. The teachers will gather together and then answer each other's questions. It can be technical or it can be educational design. And now we have many units using journal articles, lecture slides, book chapters, reports, podcasts, and videos on Perusall in their units.
That's great to hear. That's just absolutely wonderful. Returning to your article for a moment, I know you enumerate them in the article, but I think it would be really good to hear for our listeners. What do you consider the most important practical implications for educators that, follow from your research?
For me, maybe I should start, and then Tristan, you can probably provide more details. I think for me, Perusall is one of the essential tools that instructors or lecturers can use. But it's not the only tool. I think for me, when I started using it, and I've been using that for 4 years, is that it's really the beauty of that is that if you structure or you plan your units with different assessments and they can complement each other, whether it's on a weekly basis, even within a week, you have something prior to the tutorial, which is Perusall, and something post tutorial, which is the essay question. And then I have two major assignments, in two different time points of the semester. I think overall, all this assessment, they will work with each other. And one, I think something really good about Perusall is students, many of them appreciate that. Some of them, they complain is the amount of work they have to do on a weekly basis. But I think for a learning purpose, if you only have two major assignments, let's say one in the middle of the semester and the other at the end of the semester, you are not so sure whether students consistently learn throughout the semester on a weekly basis. But by using Perusall, students really demonstrate they are learning on a weekly basis. And so you can be more assured that students follow all the content that you teach throughout the semester.
I think from our experience, teacher can start by integrating Perusall with smaller, low-stake activities. It will get students more comfortable. And as Jeff mentioned before, it can be an effective way to engage English as additional language students when they have more time and more comfortable in a private environment to write those annotations by themselves.
So you mentioned low stakes. My question here is, I presume that anything you do in Perusall is low stakes anyway, but and this will be my final question, where does Perusall fit into your overall assessment scheme?
So for my unit, it's as I mentioned, it's a weekly assessment, right? So there are two important things. One is for students to understand the content of each lesson. So I think Tristan and I, we use the community of inquiry framework in our paper. So one, probably the most fundamental benefit of Perusall is the cognitive dimension. So basically, students need to learn the lessons before they come to the classroom. But I think students appreciate a lot more is the social dimension of the community of inquiry. and because they can learn together with other students. And they don't feel alone. They can ask questions. So it's not only just making comments, but they feel happy if they can help other students better learn about the lesson. So I think that's something in addition to the cognitive benefits of Perusall.
Empathy, of course, is always a great motivator, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so the third dimension is the teaching dimension. And that's something we received mixed feedback from students. And we also mentioned that in the paper because some of the students, they want more presence from the teachers, instructors like myself, because they mentioned that some of their questions are not addressed by the teachers, right? So they may ask questions and some of their classmates may be very helpful and help them to answer these questions, but they're still not sure if these are correct or not. So they almost like they want the teachers to be there so that they will have a final answer, okay, whether this is the right answer or not. But the challenge for this unit is that for this paper during 2021 we had about 200 students each semester, but now the number is almost doubled. So if you have 400 students per semester and require students to make at least 7 annotations per exercise, and some of them, they make a lot more than that. So you can have, 3,000 comments each week. And it's very hard for instructors to look at all their comments or even questions and respond to those questions. So maybe that's something that, and I want to hear your advice as well, Eric, in terms of to what extent the teachers should be present on Perusall so that students will be satisfied that they will have some feedback from the teachers on this platform.
Well, since you ask, I mean, I've spoken to many people, and there are differing points of view, but I think the prevailing point of view is that that Perusall is the student space for them to interact with each other and answer their questions. One of the potential dangers of instructors answering students is that students will stop answering other students' questions because they expect the instructors to step in and answer. So it sort of depresses the overall level of activity. In a sense, I think I tell myself always what Perusall does, it makes the questions from the students visible to the instructor. It's like having a window into the brains of the students. Questions that otherwise remain hidden completely. Right, because I mean, even even if we didn't have Perusall, students talk to each other and ask questions. The instructor isn't there either. So I have another. We use Slack to communicate across the course, and in Slack I have a channel called "I Need Help," and when students have questions that they really feel they need, an authority answer on, they can post it in that Slack channel, and which is also public because it can be read by other students, and that is where I answer any burning open-ended questions. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. One method that I use, Eric, is because there's just too many questions posed by the students. But fortunately, Perusall provides this confusion report, basically by summarizing, I guess, the students' comments and annotations. So before the tutorial starts, I will look at the confusion report, and sometimes, not always, Perusall will give me, very good summary about confusion report and some of the burning questions by the students. And I will include those questions in the tutorial, basically open up to all the students so that they can discuss as collective, right, as a whole, about some questions I think are really, really great questions.
Great. Well, I said I'd ask my last question, but I think I want to give a little twist to that last question. To what extent do you use the assessment in Perusall in your overall assessment scheme?
So on 100, Perusall accounts for 15% of the
I see.
total grade. Yeah,
I see. I see. And you measure it's not just a measure of the quantity of the annotation, but also the quality and the engagement of voting and all the other components that you take into consideration.
that's correct. So there is a minimum number of annotations students need to make, and I use the algorithm provided by Perusall to evaluate the quality of their comments.
Wonderful. Well, I would like to conclude, since our time is up, by thanking you, listener, for listening to this episode and thanking our guests, Tristan Tsui and Jeff Wang. Thank you so much for being there today on a Saturday morning in Australia.
Thank you very much, Eric, for having me here.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much.
Their article, Empowering Active Learning, a social annotation tool for improving student engagement, is available online. If you Google Empower Active Learning Perusall, you should get to the article. You can find our Social Learning Amplified podcast and more on perusall.com/social learning amplified, altogether one word. Subscribe to find out about other episodes. I hope to welcome you back on a future episode.
Social Learning Amplified is sponsored by Perusall, the social learning platform that motivates students by increasing engagement, driving collaboration, and building community through your favorite course content. To learn more, go to perusall.com to sign up for an introductory webinar. We're excited to announce that Perusall Exchange 2024, our annual community conference, is happening June 9th through June 14th. This year's theme is Education in the Age of Generative AI. Discover more at perusall.com/exchange.